folks. My name is Mo Amir, and this is VANCOLOUR, British Columbia's bona fide culture and politics TV talk show right here on Check and Check Plus. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Tonight, the government of British Columbia announced a major overhaul of the funding model for families with neurodiverse children, which has raised concerns for many families across the province. We're going to look at exactly what is being proposed and the implications for so many BC kids. Julia Boyle, the Executive Director of Autism BC, will be here to explain. But first, Canada's African, Caribbean, and Black diaspora has made significant contributions to building our country, and yet this history has largely been absent from BC school curriculum. Our first guest tonight has been part of a group of stakeholders that has been working with the BC Ministry of Education for years to develop a Black history curriculum. He is a member of the BC Community Alliance, a Black-led community organization and nonprofit dedicated to addressing the structural inequities created by racism within educational settings in British Columbia. He is Markiel Simpson. Markiel, nice to see you.
Great to be back, Mo.
I want to talk about something that happened last month. You've been part of a group of stakeholders for BC's Black community, and you've been in dialogue with the BC Ministry of Education for a couple of years now, but last month you actually got to meet the BC Minister of Education, and you provided a memorandum of understanding, and basically you were identifying some issues that you had with BC school curriculum when it comes to what's being taught around Black history. So what were some of the issues that you had with what's being taught in schools right now?
Yeah, so basically our MOU came out of dialogues that we've been having with the ministry for the past couple of years. And those conversations have been going on, and we just want to make sure that they're not going to be stagnating. So it was more so about building out a roadmap and next steps as to what we can do to achieve teaching students across the province Canadian Black history and providing anti-racism training for teachers. But this all stems from the overarching problem of there currently being no Canadian Black history being taught across the province. What the province will say is that there are references to the transatlantic slave trade and also the Underground Railroad. However, I'd contest that that's more of a colonial history than it is actually of Canadian Black history, which is what we're trying to incorporate so that Black Canadians feel seen and reflected in their learning materials, but also respected in society.
So then you're talking about the shift from a colonial history to more towards a Black history, the communities of Black Canadians throughout history. What exactly are we talking about? What are some examples that should be included in the curriculum?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm not an educator, so I'm not going to be the one working on the curriculum with folks, but I think that there's a bunch of history that folks don't know, that the first governor of BC was of African descent, one of the first city councillors in Victoria was of African descent, Harry Jerome, a 7-time world record breaker, but it goes on, and we don't want to talk about just the net positive and contributions of the Black community, but also some of the hardships that were faced in the past and currently. So trying to integrate Blackness and Black history is the end goal. Right.
And I know certainly in my experience growing up, through grade school, we did learn about Martin Luther King, and we learned about the transatlantic slave trade. But yeah, there wasn't much of a focus on Canadian Black history or communities that existed throughout Canada's history.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. And I think that what that does is it kind of makes it sound like Canada never had a racism problem or never had a civil rights movement.
Right.
And, segregation existed towards Black Canadians here in BC and across the country, frankly. So there's so much that needs to be included and updated. So we're hoping to build a relationship now with the ministry because they've created so many different iterations of a provincial curriculum, and yet for the past 100 years, they've never consulted with the Black community.
Right.
And therefore, we're at a deficit, right?
Yeah.
So myself and others have been meeting, and we have a really great team that wants to do work with the ministry to say, we want to build a relationship, we want to get the right people to you, and we want to do this work on an ongoing, sustained approach.
And what's been the response so far from the ministry? Obviously, you just stated what you've presented, and they've taken the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, but what's been the initial feedback so far?
Yeah, the minister was really gracious with her time, and it was great to meet with Minister Whiteside. And I guess what we learned from that dialogue are some of the limitations of the ministry, in particular to do with teacher training. But beyond that, there hasn't been a step towards a commitment to wanting to sign an MOU. And so we're continuing those dialogues now and saying, we'll make concessions, right? But we don't want the work that we've been doing for the last 2 years to go nowhere.
What are the main obstacles in really moving forward on this? Is it a cost thing that they would just have to really put together a program and then obviously train teachers on it? What are the obstacles here?
The teachers is one obstacle, but that is outside of the purview of the Ministry of Education, and that can be dealt with through the Ministry of Higher Education or Advanced Education. But I think other than that, it's just political will, because where there's a will, there's a way, right? And what we're experiencing, right, is the outcome of decades, centuries of systemic racism, where there aren't any Black people at the Ministry of Education who are working on this file. And so I think that finding people that we can work with at the ministry at an ongoing rate, that's one of the main challenges. And, and just getting that firm commitment that, yeah, we're here for the Black community. We hear your calls and we'll figure out a way, right? We'll make a committee. We will work with you to achieve these ends and to make sure that Black Canadians and all British Columbians get to learn Canadian Black history, get to learn in safe learning environments, and hopefully that will reduce the incidence of racism occurring across the province. Right.
And just a better understanding of this country and this land, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about Black history, and we're in March now, we just finished another Black History Month in this country. One of my concerns, or something that jumps out to me, is that while it's great to have that acknowledgement and that recognition that didn't exist before, does it make sense long-term to have Black history segmented off from just Canadian history, right? Like at some point, doesn't it have to integrate within Canadian history? Otherwise, you're kind of risking othering Black history, and that kind of perpetuates a lot of these systemic issues and systemic racism, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, because I think across Canada and across the Black diaspora in Canada, there's a lot of different feelings towards Black History Month. But I definitely agree that it's important that we incorporate Canadian Black history in a sustained manner, because as we've just seen in this past February, a lot of people are saying, like, this has been the worst Black History Month ever. Can we get a redo?
Why is that? Why are they saying that?
Just because we've seen white supremacy on full display across the country.
And it's taken attention away from it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And so whenever there's any kind of major incident, people aren't learning Black history because their attention is diverted, and that isn't fair. And it isn't fair that the burden's on the shoulders of the Black community to be teaching the whole country about its history. That's in the purview of the Ministry of Education.
And is that aspiration within the Memorandum of Understanding and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's what we've said, is that we're hoping to work with the ministry and bring the right people forward so that we can create learning resources in the short term, but also make updates in the long term to the provincial curriculum.
Markiel, always a pleasure to see you. As I said, I think you not only are a rising star in this province, I think you are a star. You're definitely one to watch. I appreciate your advocacy and all the hard work that you're doing. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mo.
Anytime. Folks, that was Markiel Simpson, a member of the BC Community Alliance, a registered nonprofit organization doing some really great work in this province to change the culture of how we approach structural inequities created by racism. Now, after some business, the system that funds resources and supports for autistic kids in this province is going through a major transition. Families across BC and advocates are not happy about this change. Julia Boyle, the Executive Director of Autism BC, is up next to explain exactly why. I'm Mo Amir. This is VANCOLOUR.